Chapter 981, Hazel's Decision. After hearing Mock's reply and combining what he knew, Klein guessed that the rat in the manor was likely the marauder demigod which had been by Hazel's side. As for why it went rabid and bit Hazel, he was unsure. He nodded slightly and tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion.
May the goddess bless her.
After saying that, he walked past the host, entered the hall, and waited for the ball tonight to begin. In a particular bedroom on the 3rd story, Hazel was sitting on a reclining chair, feeling dispirited, her feet curled up. Her left hand was wrapped in thick bandages, but there weren't any more signs of blood. Her expression was heavy, nothing like her usual arrogance. In the manor, her teacher, that was in the form of a rat, had suddenly bitten her. This resulted in her being stuck in a similar state, her entire being turbid and muddled. It was as though it wasn't her hand that was bitten, but her heart. To Hazel, although her arrogance stemmed from her upbringing, with her ability to absorb new information exceeding that of the average person's, her outstanding looks, her family standing in high society, and her maturity compared to her peers, those feelings were still within normal boundaries before she gained extraordinary powers. None of the aforementioned traits made her feel that she was different from others, or that she was fundamentally superior to ordinary people. Therefore, with her teacher, who maintained her sense of arrogance while being a representation of her fortuitous encounter and the source of her strength, suddenly becoming a real rat, to the point of not being able to speak clearly and even bite her without any reason, it left a deep impact on her. She began to question if supernatural powers represented being extraordinary or a monster. Amidst her thoughts, Hazel subconsciously pulled her black-green hair to the back of her ear and felt frustrated with the melody that came from downstairs. At this moment, she heard the creaking sound of the door as she turned her head in hesitation. Walking in was a gray rat with slick fur. Its eyes were deeper than its kind, closer to dark red. The rat said in a deep voice,
Hazel.
Hazel was first taken aback before she reeled in delight. She hurriedly stood up and blurted,
Teacher, you've recovered.
Just as she said that, she saw gray rats crawling out from the corner of her bedroom, balcony, and bed. All of them had dark red eyes, but could only produce squeaking sounds. Hazel took a step back in shock, overturning the reclining chair. Her body staggered, almost to the point of collapsing. It took her a great deal of effort to recover her balance. At this moment, she discovered that the red-eyed rats had vanished. The door had been shut tightly, having never opened. Everything that had happened was a hallucination or a nightmare that stemmed from the worries inside her. After a moment of silence, Hazel pursed her lips and sighed. She sat back down, raising her hand to her temples. As she massaged her temples, she frowned slightly. She had a nagging feeling that what had happened was too surreal. Her dark brown eyes darted about slightly as Hazel removed the necklace she wore around her neck, clenching it in her palm. The necklace's 7 green gems were equidistant from each other. Embedded around them were tiny diamonds. At this moment, one of the gems lit up slowly, emitting a green glow, giving her face a sheen and filling her eyes with mysterious symbols. The scenes from before surfaces in the girl's mind as her blurry, dreamlike state gradually turned clear. While observing the scenes, Hazel sensed something amiss. She confirmed that she hadn't been dreaming, nor was it a short hallucination from having her mind go adrift. Instead, she had been thrown into an illusion for nearly 10 seconds.
Cryptologist, this.
Hazel's dark brown eyes widened as she muttered a word filled with horror. She jumped to her feet and looked around anxiously, but failed to discover anything. But the more she looked, the more terrified she became. She had no idea what she would encounter next, nor did she understand what the person who created the dream was up to. The only thing she was certain of was that the other party's level and strength in the supernatural domain far exceeded hers. This shattered what little pride she had left. After a few minutes, the entire bedroom remained silent. The brisk melody from downstairs instantly connected oneself to the current dance steps. Hazel finally composed herself, believing that nothing would happen next. Only then did she have the mood or energy to consider the motives of the person who secretly cast the illusion. As various thoughts surfaced in her mind, Hazel suddenly came up with a theory.
The person from before was here for her teacher. Through the illusion, the person had confirmed her teacher's current situation. Is it teacher's friend or an enemy? He's definitely headed off to look for teacher. What do I do? He likely doesn't know where teacher is hiding. No, all my neighbors know that I was bitten by a rabid rat.
Hazel was thrown into panic as she clenched her necklace with increasing strength. She couldn't be sure of the motives of the other party, nor did she know what she could do. She wished to head to the manor and inform her teacher, but she was afraid of encountering danger and end up being sacrificed. Furthermore, her teacher had seemingly lost the ability to communicate. Her warnings might not necessarily be conveyed. Without realizing it, Hazel stood up and paced about in her bedroom. Finally, she made up her mind. Pursing her lips tightly, she walked to the door and said to her lady's maid outside,
I'm a little tired. I plan on sleeping now. Don't let anyone disturb me.
Yes, my lady. The maid immediately replied. After closing the door, Hazel began changing into clothes that allowed for greater movement. Her expression was extremely heavy as her teeth bit down on her lip. She had finally decided to warn her teacher at the manor. She didn't wish to become a seemingly arrogant person, but, in actuality, was a coward, one who would abandon all principles upon encountering danger. She found it despicable of herself. While the bodyguards were focusing their attention on the ball's attendees, Hazel took the opportunity to enter the garden using a water pipe from the balcony. When leaving 39 Balkland Street, Klein was holding onto a cup of sweet and iced fizzy wine, discussing business in the southern continent with a few gentlemen. He turned his head slightly, glancing at the garden. He had already noticed Hazel's actions thanks to his intuition.
Although she's not a likable girl, she has quite a kind heart.
Klein nodded indiscernibly and praised her inwardly. He wasn't worried about Hazel's actions, because to go from Northborough's Balkland Street to Mock's Manor in Balkland's northwestern suburbs would take 3 to 5 hours on carriage. And before she arrived, he would have already used an excuse to leave the ball, teleporting over directly to confirm the situation. Although Mock's Manor was in the northwestern suburbs, it was on the other side of the Tussock River. Hence, to head there, one needed to take a detour to an area with a bridge. It was fine in the day, as one could use the steam metro to head to the south side of the bridge beneath the river. At night, there were only 3 bridges to consider. It was inevitable to spend 5 hours traveling. Of course, as Klein had used Tinder before and had read 2105 Blood Vessel Thief's information, he had some idea about the powers of the Marauder pathway. Therefore, he suspected that Hazel, who had an item of a higher level, could steal the flight abilities of birds and use that short period of time to cross the river. This way, she might arrive within 3 hours.
Regardless, I'll be faster than her.
Klein retracted his gaze and began considering who his next dance partner should be. 10 in the evening, Moose Manor in the northwestern suburbs of Balkland. This place originally belonged to a viscount, and it had more than 100 years of history. Mock had bought it after his marriage, spending tons of money to maintain it every year so as to invite friends over during winter weekends for a vacation. At this moment, the land steward was arranging for the servants to check every corner and to lock all the windows and doors. This was a necessary procedure before they slept every night. A few maids walked out of the wine cellar in a group, heading straight for the kitchen to ensure that all flames had been extinguished. The moment they arrived, they heard squeaking sounds as they looked over, only to discover a grayish-white rat gnawing on a table leg. This rat seemed to sense their gaze, but it didn't run. Instead, it turned its head and glared at them with its slightly red eyes. Meanwhile, there were more squeaking sounds as red-eyed rats ran out from the roof beams, storage cabinets, and all kinds of miscellaneous, even appearing beside the furnace, which had some water boiling over it. The maids nearly screamed in fear. As members of the lowest classes of society, they were no strangers to rats. They had even killed quite a number. However, it was their first time to encounter so many at once. They couldn't help but feel a heavy blow to their senses. We need to get Gweed and the others to deal with this." A maid left the kitchen and suggested in fear. Another maid nodded immediately. Miss Hazel was bitten by a rabid rat. These don't look normal in any way. As they spoke, they retreated a great distance back, distancing themselves from the kitchen. At this moment, a figure quickly appeared on the table. He wore a white shirt and black vest under a dark-colored formal suit. On his head was a half-top hat, and he had a pair of bright leather boots. This figure slowly lifted his head while holding down his hat. He surveyed the surroundings, revealing his black hair and brown eyes. He had a thin face and cut features. He was none other than Gehrman Sparrow. Having left the ball ahead of time, Klein returned to Dwayne Dantes's residence and entered his bedroom. Then he teleported over with Winter and Uni. Of course, the latter had been left outside the manor to allow for any instantaneous switches in positions. The rats reflected into his eyes as Klein pulled the human-skinned glove on his left hand, casting his gaze towards the flower bed in the manor. Almost at the same time, the rats in the kitchen stirred as their movements turned sluggish. However, they quickly returned to normal. They had become a Bizarro Sorcerer's marionettes, and Klein could control as many as 50 marionettes, a number that would rise once he finished digesting the potion. Chapter 982, Bizarro Sorcerer vs. Parasite. When he cast his gaze towards the garden, the scene of the area was naturally reflected in Klein's mind. In the dark corner concealed by the flowers, grayish-white rats spun around wildly like they had been possessed. They kept squeaking as they attempted to push away their own kind and enter the core area. In the core area lay a gray rat the size of an adult Lowen Shorthair, a particular cat breed. Its eyes were slightly red like congealed blood. Its tail was swishing about rapidly, seemingly in a bid to vent the irascible feelings within. And whenever ordinary-sized rats approached, it would grab them and bite them to their deaths, causing rat corpses to pile up around it. But even so, this didn't stop the other rats from surging over. Pile up a rat? Upon seeing this scene, Klein suddenly had two thoughts. First, having his intuition boosted by the gray fog was a boon for a Bizarro Sorcerer's controlling of spirit body threads. This wasn't apparent in open areas where the owner of the spirit body threads could be instantly determined, but when inside a bustling city or a place with many buildings, Bizarro Sorcerers who lacked X-ray vision were unable to determine the owners of the spirit body threads that bunched up from afar. It made it difficult to accurately lock onto an enemy unless they did something special, making them stand out from others. Of course, Bizarro Sorcerers could also ignore the possibility of collateral damage and just indiscriminately control their targets. Second, the Marauder Pathway demigod that parasitized the rat was already on the verge of losing control. Not only was it several times bigger than when a road showed it, but its condition appeared very unstable. It was filled with a violent and crazy aura.
Thankfully, I came in time. If I had waited a few weeks, who knows what kind of tragedy would unfold.
A thought flashed across Klein's mind as illusory black threads appeared in front of him. At this moment, he was less than 50 meters away from the mutated rat, making it completely feasible for him to control the spirit body threads. And at this moment, the huge rat with slick fur noticed something. It hurriedly stood up and turned its head towards the kitchen. A glint flashed in its dark red eyes, instantly leaving the young man wearing a silk hat and black suit pausing in his spot. It had stolen the main thoughts of the antagonizer for the next 2 seconds, leaving his mind blank. Furthermore, it didn't do the follow-up actions that a Sequence 5 Dream Stealer would have done. Right on the heels of that, this rat raised its right forelimb and attempted to steal the enemy's Beyonder powers. At its level, it was able to steal 3 Beyonder powers from the same target and possess them for 2 hours. Of course, one attempt was limited to 1 power. At this moment, the gigantic rat's thoughts turned extraordinarily sluggish. The actions of it using its powers seemed to be bound by invisible threads, making it appear extremely lethargic. Initial control of its spirit body threads had been obtained. Its success at stealing Gehrman Sparrow's thoughts and throwing him into a daze was merely an illusion, a Bizarro sorcerer's illusion creation. Before Klein properly began controlling its spirit-body threads, Klein had already switched places with Inuni. As a marionette didn't possess any self-consciousness or thoughts, it was immune to the beyonder powers of thought usurpation. How could something that didn't exist be stolen? And in order to trick the Marauder Pathway demigod, Klein had used his illusion powers, which had experienced a qualitative upgrade. He had also deliberately made Inuni, who wore Gehrman Sparrow's appearance, put on the corresponding act. At this moment, he was outside Macht's Moose Manor. His straight-line distance from the gigantic rat exceeded 500 meters. However, this didn't stop him from controlling his opponent's spirit-body threads. This was because a Bizarro sorcerer could gift his beyonder powers to his marionette. This included the control of her spirit-body threads, the core for converting a target into a marionette. This also meant that if there weren't any other restrictions, a Bizarro sorcerer could use their marionette and extend his control of spirit-body threads from 150 meters to an unlimited range. After all, as long as there was a marionette placed every 1,000 kilometers, he could rely on extending his influence by gifting his beyonder powers. Of course, there was no ability in the world without restrictions. On the one hand, Klein's maximum number of marionettes was 50, and it was currently impossible to exceed this number. On the other hand, the only thing that a Bizarro sorcerer couldn't gift his marionette was the ability to think and be self-conscious. Therefore, the limit of using a marionette to control a marionette was the limit of his control over a marionette, 1,000 meters. Once he exceeded this range, the marionette wouldn't be able to do anything. In addition, by gifting his beyonder powers to his marionette, a Bizarro sorcerer was effectively separating a maggot that was related to his mythical creature form. It was transferred into the marionette's body via the spirit body threads. Unless he had prepared via giving the same marionette additional maggots, the marionette lacked the means of separating another maggot when converting a new marionette, or giving the new marionette his beyonder powers. And at present, Klein could only split a maximum of 50. Exceeding this number exerted a huge burden on his spirit body and produced signs of his soul fracturing. Recovery was impossible without effective treatment, and it was possible to not recover, even with excellent treatment. It would only increase the possibility of losing control. Therefore, through Klein's experiments, the maximum distance he could control spirit body threads was 1,000 plus 150 meters. And to be able to fully control a new marionette, it needed to be within 1,000 meters. At the same time, if the marionette were to die, the maggot inside the body would return to his body according to the law of beyonder characteristic convergence. However, there was a chance of experiencing a loss if the process was interrupted. While the Marauder Pathway demigod's actions turned sluggish, the rats that had previously been turned into marionettes rushed out from Inuni's side. They aimed at the garden and opened their mouths in a bid to use air cannon to cleanse the target's location. Suddenly, a dark red glimmer lit up in the gigantic rat's eyes. Instantly, Gehrman Sparrow appeared in the dark corner of the garden amidst the dead rats. As for the Marauder Pathway demigod, it had arrived inside the kitchen where there were plenty of items on the table. It had stolen Gehrman Sparrow's position. Bang! 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 The marionette rats shot out their air cannons without being able to stop midway, hitting the spot where Gehrman Sparrow was standing. It left the soil splattering and threw the flowers into the sky. It alarmed the servants in the manor as their bodies trembled violently. They had no idea what was happening and could only frantically run for shelter. The entire garden was leveled by air cannon, thinning the layer of soil within. If Klein hadn't directed the attack in that direction, the manor's main building probably would have collapsed. Amidst the flying dust, the rats were left dismembered, but Gehrman Sparrow remained standing there, uninjured. Winner Inuni had just released all the good luck he had accumulated. However, his control of the gigantic rat's spirit body threads had been terminated as a result, and there were only a limited number of spirit body threads. The rat marionettes were unable to interfere, for it might create pandemonium and cancel each other out. Hazel's teacher, the Marauder Pathway demigod, took this opportunity to regain its freedom. Then it turned around and raised its right forearm at Gehrman Sparrow, instantly stealing his beyonder powers of controlling spirit body threads. As a Sequence 4 demigod, it could accurately steal the power of the target. Typically, there were three options. and with better understanding, the higher the chance of success was. And this time, its luck was pretty good. Of course, if the target's level was much lower, and if it clearly knew of the target's situation, it could steal anything it wanted. Just as it lowered its right paw, the Marauder Pathway demigod raised its left paw. The rat marionettes slumped to the ground and could hardly turn their bodies. This was a large-scale theft that stole the rat's ability to walk. Right on the heels of that, countless magical symbols appeared in the gigantic rat's red eyes. It rapidly decrypted the puzzle and found where Klein was. With a red glint, it raised both paws and instantly appeared beside Klein. This time, it had stolen the distance between the two. At this moment, the thin-faced young man in front of the rat vanished. Replacing him was a gray rat, and around the surrounding trees, worms began crawling out as they opened their mouths. Bang! 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 Air cannons bombarded the gigantic rat and ordinary rat. While Klein was controlling the marionettes in the Moose Manor, he didn't forget to convert new marionettes around him. This was, after all, a basic trait of a Bizarro sorcerer. Then, swapping his body with a marionette, he had set up a simple trap. Dust and soil flew high into the sky as the rat parasitized by the Marauder Pathway demigod was completely inundated by it. After everything settled down, a strong scent of blood emanated from the huge crater. There were pieces of flesh everywhere. Dead Klein looked at the blast-filled scene with the eyes of his surrounding marionettes. However, he quickly frowned because there weren't any signs of a Beyonder characteristic appearing. As his thoughts raced, Klein took out a gold coin and flicked it. As the gold coin landed, scenes surfaced in his mind, revelations from his astral projection. Compared to the past, as a demigod, Klein could use such a simple divination to obtain more information. Chapter 983 in Your Name. Pa! When the flicked gold coin landed in his palm, Klein didn't even see if it was heads or tails. This was because his mind was fixed on a particular scene. Amidst the woods, the clouds high in the sky failed to completely conceal the stars that dotted the black velvet sky. The humming, clicking, and thrumming sounds of the insects spread far into the night, mixed with the two commotions of the two explosions inside Moose Manor. Klein rapidly used his knowledge from astromancy, and he roughly gauged the exact location of the scene. Then, his body phased away, appearing beside Anuni before grabbing his shoulder. During this process, Klein collected the transparent maggots he had implanted in the rats and insects before severing the connection of the spirit-body threads. In just 2 seconds, he vanished from Moose Manor, which was gradually turning chaotic and noisy, teleporting to the spot that he had seen in his mind. The area was identical to the revelation which Klein had received. It was extremely silent, to the point of being able to hear the breeze wafting through the leaves and trees. Illusory black threads, representing all the creatures with spirituality in the region, surfaced in Klein's vision. There were copious numbers of them, dozens being a gross understatement. To sieve through them and determine which was the problematic one couldn't be accomplished in a short amount of time. However, he wasn't in a rush because he had confirmed one thing. His divination results could be trusted as long as the Marauder Pathway demigod didn't possess any high-level items. After all, after becoming a Bizarro sorcerer, not only were his powers elevated, the Gray Fog's powers also seeped deeper into reality. With these two combined, it made his divination powers far more outstanding than most saints, even without heading above the Gray Fog. It was unlikely that he was weaker than a Beyonder of the Fate pathway of the same sequence. In contrast, the Marauder Pathway demigod's condition was in shambles, with its strength at an all-time low. Therefore, Klein believed that the demigod was hiding in the woods and hadn't fled far. Due to such reasons, he believed that waiting patiently was the best solution. The Marauder Pathway demigod was relatively weak, in an unstable condition, and close to losing control. After experiencing that intense battle and abandoning the rat's body, the situation only worsened. It was impossible to experience an improvement. Under such situations, if she didn't replenish herself or recover, it was only a matter of time before problems cropped up. Therefore, Klein could wait, while she couldn't. As the humming, clicking, and thrumming sounds spread, Klein waited as he hurriedly converted marionettes. He made Anuni leave the region, and hide about 1,000 meters away. Meanwhile, he kept note of the possibility of having his spirit-body threads controlled, as he recalled that the enemy had stolen the Beyonder power from his marionette. Suddenly, he heard a sound that resembled the panting that came from deep within the soul. Right on the heels of that, a hysterical voice sounded from a tree diagonally ahead of him.
Why are you forcing me? Why are you forcing me? Why are you forcing me?
Amidst the sharp voice, the tree's outer bark rapidly peeled off, revealing the core wood beneath. And on it, holes cracked open as strange worms with about 8 circles around them crawled out. The transparent rings of these worms had many three-dimensional patterns, as though time was swirling through them. Suddenly, Klein lost all his thoughts, losing the Beyonder powers of air cannon and paper figurine substitutes. He lost his belt, coat, and hat, making him appear like a sculpture of flesh. However, to a marionette, this wasn't too serious a problem. After all, it was no problem for his actual body. The lost powers could be retrieved by switching maggots. Yes, upon hearing the panting, Klein had swapped places with Inuni. And a winner like Inuni had no need to worry about his pants dropping after losing his belt. His waist swelled rapidly, thanks to the powers of Faceless, stopping his pants from falling. New marionettes in the form of insects and rats crawled out and surrounded the mutated tree. At this moment, a voice with a hint of a smile sounded from an unknown location.
Calm down. Don't be angry. Everything will be resolved.
Is that so?
Inside the tree, the vicious-sounding voice calmed down. There was some level of blankness to the voice, as though it was about to be convinced. As for Klein, he found the words extremely reasonable. He couldn't help but reflect on the reason for pushing a demigod to the brink of losing control. He had a vague feeling that he had forgotten something and was unable to recall the true reason for coming. Then, he saw a chuckling figure walk out of the woods. The figure said,
Relax. I have the means to stop you from losing control. All you need to do is to follow my instructions.
The figure was wearing a black trench coat that resembled a robe. He matched it with black trousers and leather shoes. He had a broad forehead and a thin face. Wearing a tall hat and a striking crystal monocle, he appeared extremely refined. Klein's gaze froze as a word resonated through his mind.
Aman.
The person before him was Blasphemer, Angel of Time, King of Angels, the son of the creator Aman. Although he knew that it was merely an avatar, Klein didn't waste any time. He immediately abided by the deepest cries of his heart and used creeping hunger to phase away. During this process, Inuni snapped his fingers and lit the matches in his pocket and fallen leaves a distance away, allowing him to appear beside Klein with flaming jump. Klein grabbed him and vanished with him. In the event that Aman tried to stop him, or if Inuni wasn't able to return fast enough, Klein's plan was to abandon his marionette and travel far away. Under such circumstances, the death of a marionette to ensure his survival was definitely worth it. Luckily, Amon's attention was placed on the peeling tree. He didn't stop him, or should it be said, it was the case that he didn't have the time to stop him. After Klein and his marionette vanished, Amon halted and turned to look at where the two were originally standing. As though in thought, he nodded slightly and scoffed.
A Bizarro Sorcerer of Evernight.
He then retracted his gaze and looked at the half-mutated tree and asked with a smile,
A descendant of Jacob?
Yes, do you know my ancestor?
Inside the tree, the rat demigod asked, as though it had grabbed onto a floating board while drowning. Imon stroked his chin and nodded indiscernibly.
Of course. They tasted excellent.
Inside the tree, the descendant of the Jacob family fell silent. Only after a few seconds did a voice filled with horror utter,
You are blasphemer Aman.
Inside the tree hole, the worm with rings began crawling out. However, they quickly stiffened and froze in their spots. IB. IB high B. IB adjusted the crystal monocle and said with a smile,
That's too late now, isn't it? It might have been of some use if you had struggled and resisted from the beginning, but now, do you believe that I'm here on my own?
As he spoke, the trees around him shook as the leaves of different trees ruffled. Birds leaped onto the branches and let out crisp chirping, and even the night breeze had an indescribable feel to it.
You.
The Jacob descendant inside the mutated tree's speech came to an abrupt halt. Eamon stuffed his hands into the pockets of his trench coat and casually laughed.
I heard that your family has split into tiny families, with zero interaction, afraid that the lot of you will be caught by me, right? Ah, right. Didn't you establish a secret organization with Zoroaster's descendants, as well as other Beyonders of the Marauder Pathway? I believe it's called the Hermits of Fate. You're probably a member, aren't you? Let me see if I can replace you and infiltrate that organization. Heh. A secret organization meant to defend against Eamon and deal with Eamon, has Eamon participating in it. Just the thought of it is rather interesting.
Having said that, he glanced at the mutated tree that was vigorously shaking and said,
Unfortunately, from what I can see from your fate, you didn't undergo a good education in mysticism. You can't be a member of that organization. Are you the only one left of this Jacob family branch? You wished to seek out a secret treasure left by the Jacob family in Backland, but you ended up seriously injured for some reason and ended up sealed. Ha! You even parasitized an ordinary animal. Yet, there are signs of you not talking to humans for an extended period of time. Aren't you very puzzled as to why you didn't receive any warnings about this, from the knowledge contained within the potion or the murmurs when you advanced to Sequence 4? Yes, it's because I've deleted them.
No.
A sharp scream filled with anger and viciousness sounded. There was an indescribable pain in it. The mutated tree's tremblings intensified until it calmed down at some point. Streams of light flew out from within and surged into Eamon's body. Taking out a piece of silk, Eamon took off his monocle and wiped it as he mumbled.
How foolish. She actually believed me when I said it's too late. One flaw with fellows who are on the brink of losing control is that they're brainless and easily fooled. If she had carefully thought about it, how could she not realize the problems within? If I could quickly finish her off and steal her fate, why would I be wasting so much time chatting with her? An avatar is an avatar after all.
After Eamon wore his monocle again, the stream of light that flowed out of the mutated tree had been completely absorbed by him. At this moment, a figure was passing through the woods, Hazel in hunting gear. Notskaw. She seemed to sense something as she subconsciously looked over, only to see Eamon. Then, she revealed a surprised smile.
Teacher, have you recovered?
Oh, someone has noticed a problem with you. It's best that you hide.
Eamon listened in silence before curling the sides of his mouth slowly.
All right.
Chapter 984, Active Response. Klein didn't directly teleport back to 160 Buckland Street. Instead, he went to sea with a noonie, found a secluded spot, and chanted the honorific name of the fool. Then, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray fog. With a beckon, he summoned a paper figurine. Immediately after that, he picked up one of the cards of blasphemy on the long bronze table in front of him, and he placed it inside his body. Klein suddenly had an additional dark red robe. This appearance seemed to look like rust and settled gunpowder that had been stained by copious amounts of blood. As for his face, it was covered by a dark gold mask. The patterns on it were ancient and set off a contrasting appearance with the crown he wore that was embedded with gems that sparkled red, blue, and green. This was a change that the Red Priest card brought about. After repeated experiments, Klein had confirmed that certain traits of the Red Angel card were very compatible with the Paper Angel's interference effect with fate. It allowed the relevant powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog to be further enhanced. Therefore, he had chosen it instead of the Black Emperor or Tyrant cards. After completing this, Klein, in the form of the Red Priest, picked up a paper figurine and shook it. He then fused it with the gray fog that surged over, throwing it at the rippling blob of light that represented him offering a prayer. The paper figurine quickly burgeoned, turning into an angel bathed in golden light. Flames crisscrossed behind it, taking on the form of 12 pairs of wings. This war angel then used the secret connection that was generated from a prayer to descend upon the world, and enveloped Klein in a noonie with its fiery wings. Only with this done did Klein relax. Putting down the Red Priest card, he returned to the real world. He first sought out food for creeping hunger before returning to 160 Boakland Street with Inuni. One transformed back into Dwayne Dantes, while the other turned into a young man with mixed blood. After combing his hair, Klein walked to the balcony of his master bedroom, looking far into the distance where Mock's residence stood. He discovered that the place remained brightly lit, a clear indication that the ball hadn't truly ended. Typically, a ball continued until midnight, and of course people were permitted to leave before then. After all, most people that were willing to dance late into the night were young adults.
Phew. Eamon is truly terrifying. Just a battle involving a Marauder Pathways demigod was enough to garner his attention, even if one was in the city and the other was in the suburbs. At his level, the law of beyonder characteristic convergence should be extremely substantial. Yes, I can't eliminate the possibility that the demigod's mutation, while being on the brink of losing control, had caught Eamon's notice.
Klein couldn't help but recall everything that had happened, afraid that he would find a thin, monocle-wearing, young, refined man sitting in the reclining chair behind him while sipping from a glass of red wine when he turned around. He felt lucky that he had already become a demigod and could converge the aura of the gray fog to prevent beyonders of particular pathways from detecting it. Otherwise, with the interest Eamon had shown in the past, his focus definitely would have been placed on Gehrman Sparrow instead of the Marauder Pathway demigod. If that had been the case, he might not have left so successfully by teleporting. As the Amon in Backland was likely only an avatar, Klein was still rather confident of the Paper Angel's interference. He believed that this King of Angels had no means to trace him all the way to 160 Balkland Street from a trail of breadcrumbs, and also determined that he was Dwayne Dantes. But this still didn't ease his mind. This was because the Marauder Pathway demigod was involved in Balkland Street as well. She had encountered Admiral of Blood here and had been forced to trigger the explosives, finally parasitizing a rat. Here she had been warned by a mirror, learning about the Marauder Pathway Angel who was in need of replenishments and that Blasphemer Eamon was on the way. As she had refused to answer the mirror's question, she was struck by lightning and had to move to Moose Manor. In addition, Hazel, the target she attempted to parasitize but was her student on the surface, was influenced by a powerful illusion tonight, exposing her teacher's condition. All of these factors combined might make Amon pay a visit. The more Klein thought about it, the more unsafe he found Boakland Street. From his point of view, just the warning about a Marauder Pathway Angel in desperate need for replenishments was enough for Eamon to take up residence in Boakland Street for a period of time. Of course, there was an extremely small chance that the Marauder Pathway demigod escaped and that nothing was divulged. However, Klein believed it was impossible. After all, even he had the confidence of handling the matter himself, much less Eamon, who had a certain level of control over Marauder Pathway existences.
Sigh, I shouldn't have been wary against the grandpa and Leonard. If I wasn't worried that he would achieve another stage of recovery and cause Leonard harm, everything would have been settled rather quickly. I wouldn't be in this situation of attracting Eamon. What do I do next? Regardless, I need to do something. Otherwise, not only will my identity as Dwayne Dantes be at risk, I might even implicate Leonard on Pinster Street and the ordinary people on Balkland Street. Who knows if Eamon will suddenly parasitize them or not?
As Klein's thoughts whirled, his expression grew heavy as he began seriously considering eliminating Eamon's avatar. His first idea was to establish contact with Leonard and come up with a plan with the grandpa in him, Palez Zoroast. With this Marauder Angel's knowledge of Eamon, who shared the same pathway, it was likely that he could come up with a good plan. Klein immediately took out his pen and paper in preparation to write, but after making a few scribbles with the fountain pen, he paused. He found the confidentiality lacking because describing in detail might result in having an effect on fate, allowing Amon to notice it ahead of time.
The more secure method would be to pull Leonard above the gray fog. The discussion can be held there and have him relay it and discuss it with Palez Zoroast. Apart from this, what else can be done? Report it to the church and get them to disinfect all of Backland.
Klein put down his fountain pen and muttered silently as he considered other proposals. He soon gave up the thought of reporting Eamon because Leonard hadn't done so previously. with the understanding that the grandpa in him had of blasphemer Amon. It implied that this method was useless. Either there was a huge flaw, or it might end up affecting oneself.
It's better to ask Leonard first and gain a better situation of the exact situation before coming to a decision.
Klein quickly made up his mind. He temporarily suppressed the urge to draw the symbol to ask a Rhodes, or use the paper crane to contact Snake of Fate Will Ossepton. After dismissing Inuni, he entered the master bedroom's bathroom, took 4 steps counterclockwise, and arrived above the gray fog. Sitting at the seat of the fool, Klein conjured the world Gehrman sparrow and made the fake person pray piously.
Honorable Mr. Fool, please inform Leonard Mitchell that I've discovered traces of blasphemer Amon. I hope that he can head to your kingdom as soon as possible to discuss the subsequent actions. The time will be up to him to decide.
After throwing the prayer's content into the crimson star representing Leonard, Klein added as the fool,
There's no need to hide it from Zoroast.
in the outskirts of North Borough, in a sparse forest, Leonard extended his right hand and held down a blurry, wild wolf's figure. The wolf whimpered as the flames burning in its eyes dissipated, returning to normal. Its body faded away and vanished into the wind. However, it no longer had the bloodthirsty feeling it previously exuded. All was calm and serene. In the northern continent, after the Pale Era, the 7 Orthodox churches, along with the various nations, jointly pushed for a cemetery burial act which had been strictly carried out to this day. As the number of humans that turned into ghosts were rare, the only exception involved the difficult-to-detect deaths in the slums or drowning victims that couldn't be fished out in time. However, the spirits of the deceased weren't only limited to humans. All kinds of wild animals and all kinds of creatures with spirituality could become specters under certain conditions. Furthermore, it was impossible for them to head to human cemeteries to have themselves interred. This often resulted in rumors of ghost sightings in the wild. Just as he put the wild wolf to rest, Leonard suddenly saw a boundless grayish-white fog appear before his eyes, as the world Gehrman sparrow's prayers resounded in his ears.
Traces of blasphemer Amon. He is still in Backland.
Leonard's eyelids twitched as he tensed up immediately. As he had received Mr. Fool's instructions, he didn't hesitate to speak with a suppressed voice.
Old man, did you see it? Did you hear it?
Palez Zoroast's slightly aged voice resounded once again.
No, although I sensed an anomaly, I didn't see or hear anything. It will only happen if I deepen my parasitization of you, allowing me to directly control your astral projection.
Do you think I'm a fool? From the looks of it, Mr. Fool's response is done through the astral projection.
Leonard thought before he said in deliberation.
Old man, Klein informed me via Mr. Fool that he has discovered traces of Amon. He wants me to head over to Mr. Fool's kingdom to discuss this matter. Do you have any suggestions?
Palez Zoroast fell silent for a few seconds before he let out a long sigh.
If he wishes to deal with Amon's avatar in Backland, tell him that unless he has the blessings of concealment, the outcome will be as you expect it to be.
By saying this, Old Man is giving preconditions. He means that he will only be willing to cooperate with the blessings of concealment.
Leonard's mind raced as he immediately found a dark corner and informed the world Klein via prayer that he could do it immediately. As for the danger that resulted from losing control of his body in the wilderness, Leonard wasn't worried since he still had a marauder pathway angel in his body. Before long, he saw a crimson tide surge towards him and inundate him. Chapter 985, Blessed of Concealment. Above the boundless grayish-white, inside the magnificent palace. Just as Leonard Mitchell's figure appeared to the side of the long bronze table, he subconsciously stood up and wanted to bow to Mr. Fool. However, when he looked over, he found the seat empty. No one was sitting there. A thought flashed through Leonard's mind.
Doesn't Mr. Fool usually sit there?
He cast his gaze to the other end of the long mottled table. The world was sitting there silently, as though he was fused with the gray fog in an indistinct blur.
There's only the two of us. There's no need to deliberately use Gehrman Sparrow's appearance.
Leonard casually said to the world as he sat back down. After discovering Mr. Fool's absence, he instantly became relaxed. He wasn't as reserved as he was in the previous tarot gathering, just short of throwing his leg up on the table.
It's a habit.
Klein replied succinctly. Leonard nodded in thought.
I heard that Gehrman Sparrow's persona at sea is a cold, reserved, refined, and polite person. Your current performance matches that description very well. However, you wasn't like this in the past, Klein. You have to remember that you're only acting. Do not be affected by your persona as Gehrman Sparrow.
Hey, I pulled you up here to discuss Eamon, not to have a chat. Why do you show so little concern towards your grandpa's matters?
Klein had indeed made it a habit to use the world's persona in such situations. But when this was pointed out by Leonard, he was a little embarrassed to change back into his original appearance. He tersely acknowledged that he would keep it in mind.
Did Pallas Zoroast teach you about the part that you're only acting?
Yes.
Leonard answered frankly.
This grandpa seems pretty good. He mentioned such crucial information to Leonard. Compared to him, the rat demigod from before was really up to no good. She didn't teach Hazel any of the most common knowledge. Even if she did, she distorted some of it. Heh. No matter how unaffiliated you are, how could they not know anything at the level of a demigod? Even that half-crazy sea serpent, Calvetua, knew how to respond to rituals or obtain sacrificial items. It even knew some theurgy and how to perform bestowments.
Klein established a first impression of Pallas Zoroast. However, he wasn't hasty to make a judgment. After all, fishing was an activity that required bait. Just one instance didn't prove much. Seeing Klein being silent, Leonard cut the small talk and got down to business.
Where did you discover traces of blasphemer Eamon?
Klein went straight to the point.
I was pursuing a demigod of the Marauder's Pathway who was on the brink of losing control. However, I ended up encountering Eamon in the outskirts of Backland. All I could do was use Mr. Fool's powers to directly escape. Quote, Eamon's avatar really is still in Backland.
Leonard sighed before he asked in a rather curious and desultory manner,
Why were you pursuing a Marauder Pathway demigod who's on the brink of losing control?
After he asked the question, he realized something and swiftly added,
If it involves some plans of Mr. Fool, pretend as though I never asked.
Why? Isn't dealing with Beyonders on the brink of losing control, or those who have lost control, the duty of a Nighthawk?
Klein sighed when he heard Leonard's question. It stirred up memories of his time in Tingen City. In that short 2+ months, he had handled many similar matters. It included the mandated punisher of the Church of Storms who turned into a monster, Hood Eugen's loss of control, and Old Neil's corruption by the Hidden Sage. Although they were only a handful, they left a deep impression on him. It drilled certain actions deep to the bone. Therefore, after taking into account everything that he knew, and coming to the conclusion that the Marauder Pathway demigod was on the brink of losing control after rabidly biting someone, he didn't hesitate and used his illusion from downstairs. From that, he gained confirmation from Hazel and didn't even wait a day or two to make preparations. All he did was do a divination above the gray fog and came up with a rough plan before taking action. Such matters were emergencies for him. In addition, Klein had long had the intention of getting rid of the Marauder Pathway demigod because the malintent she had shown when dealing with Hazel was obvious. Furthermore, she had tried to entice Miss Magician to seek out treasure that was in actual fact a trap. If he wasn't a demigod back then, which meant a great difference in strength, he would have taken action back then. Besides, he was also afraid that he would trigger unnecessary accidents. It was precisely because of this that he followed his predetermined plan to eliminate her once he confirmed the Marauder Pathway demigod's condition. The first stage of his plan was to lure the enemy out of Moose Manor to prevent her from producing her incomplete mythical creature form before dying, as that would have affected the ordinary people. The result was pretty satisfactory. With himself as the bait, he achieved his goal, but he failed to use the air cannon bombardment to finish the battle. This made the Marauder Pathway demigod flee into the woods and parasitize a tree. Klein actually had a second stage to his plan and had even prepared contingencies in the event he failed to eliminate her. To his surprise, Eamon suddenly appeared, making him terminate all his plans and flee without any hesitation. Klein's contingency was to let a marionette escape the battlefield and write to the experimental demigod byproduct of the numinous episcopate, Patrick Bryan, to get his help. This undying likely possessed the ability to traverse the spirit world after all, and if there were any additional unforeseen circumstances, he could summon Miss Messenger and make payment after the deed. As his memories surfaced, Klein replied to Leonard with a sighing tone.
A secret.
After pausing for a second, he asked,
Why didn't you find an opportunity to inform the Church of Evernight about the arrival of Eamon's avatar in Backland?
Leonard hurriedly gave an explanation, indicating that if Eamon's actual body were to arrive, a deity's descent was almost certain. He also explained that Eamon could use the death of his avatar to see the corresponding changes in destiny, thus finding the source of the stir and figuring out the activity range of the mastermind. It was also Eamon's style to circle about a superficial avatar, but hide a dozen, dozens, or hundreds of avatars. Eamon's avatars could parasitize all kinds of creatures with spirituality. If one wasn't a demigod, they wouldn't even notice the parasite. Towards the end, Leonard informed Klein in detail about the example Old Man had raised, of how Eamon would steal one's destiny. This sent a chill running down Klein's back, thankful that he hadn't been rash in dealing with Eamon, otherwise Mr. Fool might have been replaced.
It's no wonder Leonard didn't report the matter. For Eamon to appear so openly, he is actually fishing. Furthermore, he has even more avatars hiding in secret, and he can parasitize the microbes in the air. This alone sends my scalp tingling. The creatures I can control at the moment can't even reach that state. The smaller the creature, the harder it is to see the spirit body threads. It's quite a special case. Sigh, I can't use the Church's power, unless it's done by someone who is without any problems in every aspect.
Klein commiserated as he gained a deeper understanding of Amon's terror. It left him a deeper impression. From his point of view, Leonard was an excellent candidate to report the matter to the Church of Evernight, but with Palez Zoroast parasitizing him, he didn't dare expose his existence to Eamon. In addition, the hanged man could also shoulder this responsibility, but he was unable to provide the source of the news. This meant problems that deserved deeper investigations into. One choice after another flashed across Klein's mind. Finally, he paused on himself, his identities as Klein Moretti and Gehrman Sparrow.
As a blessed of Evernight, it's entirely reasonable for me to inform the Church about Eamon's appearance in Backland. Eamon won't be able to pick faults with that. And having involved myself with the battle with the Marauder Pathway demigod tonight, as the Bizarro sorcerer who witnessed Eamon and is now in possession of the knowledge that the Angel of Time's avatar is here in Backland, it's also very normal, and not something that will garner Eamon's suspicion. At the same time, as I'm a blessed of Evernight, just the loss of an avatar likely won't incur his full wrath for revenge. After all, he might be facing a very possible trap, a deity's descent. Having a backer really feels good. However, a price is always exacted for what fate bestows.
Klein quickly came to a conclusion over the matter. Then he habitually changed his point of view and began considering this matter from Eamon's point of view.
Eamon is definitely no stranger to Bizarro sorcerers. He can determine my pathway from my control of the marionettes and my swapping of locations. Since Eamon allowed a Bizarro sorcerer to flee, he must have made preparations to be exposed. He might even be hoping to attract the target he is looking for. I was using Gehrman Sparrow's face, but that doesn't imply anything. A faceless's appearance is the least of one's concern. Then how would Eamon determine my identity? A powerhouse that lurks in the dark and a demigod of the seer pathway. As the Church of Evernight and the Secret Order are in control of the formulas, ingredients, and a mermaid, there are almost no unaffiliated Bizarro sorcerers. The descendants of the Antigonus family have all been wiped out. Therefore, a Bizarro sorcerer is either from the Secret Order or a secret proxy that the Church of Evernight secretly nurtures. Together with me being in Backland, the answer is almost obvious. Due to these reasons, Eamon wouldn't find it difficult to determine that the Church of Evernight is aware of his whereabouts and will begin an operation to wipe him out. My reporting of him will be within expectations. Not doing so would be abnormal. Yes, he will definitely be hiding. Even if he replaces the identity of that marauder pathway demigod, he wouldn't come to Bokeland Street anytime soon.
Having made this judgment, Klein immediately felt a little more relieved because it meant that he would have plenty of time to prepare.
What ideas do you have?
Seeing Klein's prolonged silence after he finished his description, Leonard couldn't help but ask. Klein reined in his thoughts and asked without answering him,
What suggestions does Zoroast have regarding this?
He said that if you wish to deal with Amon's avatar in Backland, you have to first obtain the blessings of concealment.
Leonard replied truthfully.
Blessings of concealment. Zoroast is openly trying to test me. Half the symbol behind the fool's seat represents concealment. Using paper angels and the red priest card, I can stir the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog, making it possible for me to disrupt Amon's avatar. However, it's probably unable to prevent him from prying into fate itself. However, I still have another identity as Evernight's Blessed. And another title of the goddess is the Mother of Concealment. Is eliminating Amon's avatar considered paying the price or receiving a bestowment? Seems like both.
Klein thought before replying in a deep voice.
Tell Zoroast that I'm a blessed of concealment. I will attempt to pray for help.
He was referring to being the blessed of the Mother of Concealment, but it was certain that Zoroast would understand it as being the Fool's Blessed.